All right, let's do this. Welcome back to the Other Half podcast. My name is Gabe Gonzalez.
I'm Josiah Gonzalez, the podcast where we delve into the experiences and perspective of people who are mixed ethnicities.
And today we have our very first guest. He is a childhood friend of mine growing up here in Fort St. John. We are both half Asian, which is super rare in northern BC. And so we had that unique connection. And I guess after high school, we went our separate ways, went to university, and that's been 14 years. So in the last 14 years, we kind of sparingly stayed connected. But nonetheless, he's here, our very first guest, and he's going to talk about his experience being mixed as well. And we're just going to chat about life. Welcome, everyone. Josh Cooey.
Hey, what's up? 14 years. That's crazy.
Man, 2006. Like,
yeah, wow.
Old men now, huh?
We are old men. Yeah.
Like, we're getting so old that even Cy is getting old for your grad.
Oh, man.
Yeah, that's true. Sai, how old are you now?
I'm turning 29 this year.
What?
Yeah, wild.
That's crazy, man. Wow.
Yeah.
That's bizarre.
Mm-hmm.
I guess a good way to start would be sharing with everyone like what your mix is on both sides.
Yeah, for sure. So my dad is from Hong Kong, so he is Chinese. I guess most people from Hong Kong are Han Chinese, which is like the majority of Chinese people in China. And probably the majority of Chinese people that we see here in North America too, because I think there's something like 56 minority people groups that make up the Chinese population, where the majority are the Han Chinese. And so that's my background. And so, yeah, my dad's family comes from Fujian province from a city called Xiamen. And so that's where his dad was from. And then his dad migrated to Hong Kong. And my dad's mom is ethnically Chinese, but grew up in Indonesia and also later migrated to Hong Kong. And then my mom, her parents are mostly English, actually. I always thought we were more German. And I was listening to your guys' previous episode, and I think you said German and French are basically genetically identical. Is that what you said?
Yeah, they kind of descended from the same population, I guess. Of people.
Right.
And they culturally split off and settled in areas. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And so my mom, I think my mom has done 23andMe or one of those self DNA or self ancestry test kits, and I think what it showed up was mostly English and Irish. And so I always just tell people I'm Chirish to make it easy. Chirish. Yeah.
That's a new one though, hey?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. And my mom, so yeah, interesting. So she grew up in a pretty small, isolated community in British Columbia. It's called Ocean Falls, and Ocean Falls is a pretty cool community. I've never been there, but it's actually pretty close, relatively speaking, to where I live now. So now I'm up in Terrace on the northwest coast, and so I could take a couple ferry rides and get to Ocean Falls. Not easily, it's super isolated, and I think the ferry runs seasonally, and otherwise you have to take a float plane into the community. But it was one of those places that was like a mill town, and basically the only reason you would live there is if you worked there seasonally, either with fisheries or logging or at the mill.
And where did your parents meet? Did they meet in Fort St. John?
Yeah, my parents did. Yeah, they met in Fort St. John, I think at a birthday party. And yeah, the rest is history. So my dad was working as a pharmacist, and my mom was working at it as a nurse at the time.
Okay.
And so they kind of had some, I guess, some professional overlap. They were both in health, in the health field, and yeah, so I think they had some mutual friends in that arena.
See, this is what I find so amazing. Like, how do worldly cultured people like our fathers end up in Fort St. John? Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
right? Like, I think my dad's family, they came in the 80s. I think there was a
Okay.
big explosion in the 80s of Asian immigrants. So I think that's when they came
Right.
over. Um,
Yeah.
but I think your parents are a little older than ours. I
I
think.
think so. Yeah. Because how old are actually? I don't know, it's gonna be bad. I don't even know if I know my parents' ages anymore. It's like I
Well,
just know they keep getting older.
Yeah.
because they're grandparents. So once they hit grandparents, it's just.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Our dad was 60 and our mom was born in 61. So
Okay. Yeah. I don't even know what year my parents were born in. I'm a bad son. Um, I know. Okay. So if I think about, so I was born in '88. My brother was born 84. So yeah, I think my dad would have arrived to Fort St. John in the 80s as well. Probably like 81 or 1980.
yeah.
But my dad immigrated to Vancouver for schooling. And then when he finished his schooling, I think he I think he lived in Surrey for a while, but then moved to Fort St. John. And I think he was one of the first, maybe not the first, but like one of a few people of Chinese descent in Fort St. John when he moved there.
Yeah, that makes
And
sense.
that's kind of why I think um, my mom. So my mom is like short, dark complexion, and I think he was like, well, she looks Chinese enough, and this is as close as we want to get in Fort St. John.
That's so good.
Yeah, he kind of half jokes that every now and then, but I think there's probably a lot of truth to that as well.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Crazy. Yeah, I think our parents met at the same restaurant they were working at. I think that's
Oh
it.
yeah.
No,
Where were they?
I don't think dad was working there. Mom was working at a Filipino restaurant as a server, which is the wildest thing.
There was a
And
Filipino restaurant in Fort St. John.
Yeah.
What?
In the
To
80s.
in the 80s, like of all
No
things
way.
in Fort St. John, a Filipino restaurant.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so she was working there as a server, and he was just because he was part of the Filipino community. So all the other Filipinos or all the Asians, and then
Right. She was playing so we have Uncle Rod is what we call him. I mean, I don't know if it's the
Oh,
same
wait.
for Chinese.
Is that the guy who ran Mama Pandas?
He still runs it, yeah.
What? No way. Crazy.
yeah,
Oh, Uncle Rod.
That guy is sweet.
He's still there. And I think he was working there or maybe running that Filipino restaurant.
yeah,
And our mom would just go play cards. Like she would just go hang out with these Filipino guys and whoever worked at the restaurant. And she was actually in with the Filipino community before she met our dad.
yeah. She was
And
already
Wow.
immersed in the Filipino culture, which was interesting.
yeah, and I mean, she was a
Man.
small town girl who went to Victoria, and then she became all cultured and was like, "I'm a city girl.
Yeah.
I
Your
like
mom's
Asians."
she's so indie, hey?
Yeah.
So underground.
But
Man.
she met an Asian that couldn't speak English very well, and she's like, "Oh, nice long hair."
Yeah, I remember seeing pictures of your dad with the long hair. Like, didn't he have a mullet?
Yeah, just a big ass
Yeah,
mullet.
that was sweet.
The rest is history.
What a beauty. Huh. Yeah, I think you were gonna ask. Yeah. So you call Rod Uncle Rod. It's kind of similar in Chinese culture, right? Like basically whoever's older than you and is a friend of the family. Sometimes they don't even have to be a friend of the family, right? You just call them uncle.
Yeah. And I think that's a very like Asian thing. And I mean Asian from like, because I know it happens in Indian culture as well. Like,
Yeah.
it's just everyone calls everyone who's older as a sign of respect, uncle or auntie, or cousins or whatever. Everyone's family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think we were talking about that the other day as like collectivist versus individualist societies, and a lot of Asian cultures are collectivist, so they have more of like a respect for anyone who's kind of, you know, older than them or whatever, and they don't individualize like, oh, that's not my uncle, that's uncle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like,
exactly.
In North America, we're like, no, that's not my uncle. I'm not going to call him uncle. That's silly.
Yeah. That's interesting. I think I was having a similar discussion with a friend, and basically like any culture other than Western culture, that's kind of how there's like that's kind of how a patriarchy or matriarchy kind of works, right? Like you always refer to just your elders as like a family member, because like I worked in First Nations communities as well, and it was very similar, right? Like, and it was interesting because like I have that background being Chinese, where like that's exactly what we do. But when I was working in this First Nations community, I just had the assumption that they were actually related. And then, you know, another community member kind of told me like, oh yeah, no, it's different than how it works with white families. Like we're not actually related.
Yeah.
That was racist, Josh. He just assumed they were all. Oh my God. Speaking of like a funny take on racism, you should watch Jimmy O Yang on Amazon.
Oh, I started watching that.
Man, it's such a good stand-up.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I actually think I watched it when I was really tired, so I think I ended up falling asleep.
That one bit he does about he's watching like the World Cup in a bar, and
this old Mexican dude came up to me. He couldn't really speak English, and this is what he said. He was like, amigo, Mexico, Korea, tomorrow, huh? And I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? What are you trying to start World War III or something? I'm not even Korean. And what that means, okay? I have Mexican friends back home just like you. He was like, no, I'm not Mexican. I'm El Salvador. And I'm like, oh, great, now I'm the fucking racist.
And then I thought about it, I was like, oh yeah, that must be the hardest like subgroup of people to determine. Like El Salvadorian, Guatemalan, Honduran. Like we just assume they're all Mexican.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Like for us, because we're Asian, we're able to pick out different Asians. Like that's a skill that I think we've adapted from being. I don't know about you, Josh, but that's a thing that I've picked up.
Yeah, I think I can to some extent. I think mostly, I would agree there, right? Like there's just some nuances that you pick up on in Asian cultures. Mm-hmm. I find, however, I do make mistakes between Japanese and Korean people until I hear them speak, right? Like if you kind of hear the language, then it's easier to identify where they're from. But I would agree. South American, that could be difficult. That is difficult.
That whole Central America.
Yeah, that's right. Did you ever watch King of the Hill?
No, I didn't get into that one.
No. There's an episode where Hank Hill, he's like the main character, goes golfing with these other Texans, and so they're golfing with Texans, and then there's some Chinese businessmen they're golfing with, and then his friend who's from Laos, and then his friend from Laos, his name is Khan, and so there's one segment where like these Chinese businessmen are talking and discussing whether or not they want to do business with Hank, who's a propane salesman. And so Hank goes, "Hey, Khan, what are they saying?" And Khan just goes, "I don't know. Do I look Chinese to you?"
So are you Chinese or Japanese?
I live in California last 20 years, but first come from Laos.
Huh?
Laos. We lay ocean.
The ocean? What ocean?
We are lay ocean. From Laos, stupid. It's a landlocked country in Southeast Asia. It's between Vietnam and Thailand, okay? Population 4.7 million.
So are you Chinese or Japanese?
Oh,
Yeah, see, Laos has got to be tough. Like Laos, Vietnam, maybe
Yeah.
like Thailand, like all those countries that are right there. Like, good luck
Oh
Yeah, they all
yeah,
look
I know.
until you
Well,
until you
yeah.
hear them speak, I guess.
Yeah, I guess, right. Well, that's the thing with borders, right? Like they're so fluid in terms of time. And
Mhm.
with that fluidity in time, I think there's fluidity in populations and just how often people have actually interacted with one another.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Sai pointed this out in our last episode about like the Filipino ancestry is actually like we're Austronesian, like we're islanders. We're
Right,
not
yeah.
we're not like the mainland type of Asian.
Yeah.
Even
We would have been
Viking-
like
Go ahead,
tens of
Zach.
thousands of years ago kind of thing. We were like when
Yeah.
they
Right.
moved it over, but
Well, and then I guess with the colonization, like it's like the Philippines was actually colonized longer than Mexico was by the Spanish,
Hmm.
which is
Yeah.
interesting.
It's
because,
great. That is interesting.
like our language or Tagalog or Filipino is a blend hybrid language, so it's weird that we didn't actually pick up Spanish. So something went awry with their colonization there, but
Hmm.
well,
Filipinos,
40% Tagalog is Spanish.
yeah.
Derived.
Did you say 40%?
Either Spanish completely or derived from Spanish.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's crazy.
But a lot of Filipinos can be mistaken for Mexicans. Like we just have that look, right?
Yeah. I remember everybody called you Mexican in high school.
Yeah, I mean, I could easily like I always have this fear of crossing the U.S. border. My last name's Gonzalez.
Yeah.
I clearly don't look Filipino, and I could probably pass as Mexican for sure.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But you know, I think that's one of the really beautiful things about being mixed is just the ambiguity of our appearances and
Mhm.
how, you know, I think there's something comforting in that where, you know, even if you were to travel in South America, there'd probably be some point at which you would be depending on what you're wearing. And if you like adopt the swagger, you know, there might be at some point where you would be misidentified as a local.
Right.
hmm
Like
I
I
mean-
kind of have the same thing too. You know, like there's just ambiguity, right? Like the question of like, yeah, so where are you from
Yeah.
is always, well, actually less now, actually, but I remember growing up and even you know, up to a few years ago, it was always that question. Yeah, so like, where are you from?
Because like we look white on the outside, like
Mhm.
for sure. We can just be like, oh, they're white guys, right? Especially me. I'm super hairy. I always have a big
Yeah, you,
beard, long hair
dude,
on,
that
right?
beard is
Yeah. It's
impressive.
the shortest it's been in a while, but so like we both look white, and so I think in terms of like being identified as like where are you from or those kind of things, I don't think they resonate as much, like because you look Chinese, right? Like you look Asian, you don't look white at all, and maybe a little bit ethnically ambiguous in terms of like you can pass for native or Asian or whatever, but do you kind of take offense to that, or have you ever in the past taken offense to those kind of like stereotypes of like who you are or where you're from?
Yeah, definitely. I think part of it depends on who's asking,
Yeah.
and just the tone in the question, because like I've received the question from a lot of people in a lot of different ways, where you know there's question can be asked with some negative connotation, or the question can be asked with just genuine interest.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it really depends on who's asking the question and why and how they've asked it. but yeah, and sometimes, if I do kind of sense like, oh, like, why do you want to know? Why do you need to know? Then I just give them like the long way around. They get tired of asking like, where are you from? I'll say, oh, for St. John. Or like, oh, where are your parents from? I was like, well, my mom's from, Ocean Falls, like the West Coast. My dad is from Vancouver originally. Well, not I never say originally, but it takes me a while to get there.
Yeah. Give them the runaround, eh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting. So I've spent some time in Hong Kong and China, and it's interesting. Even when you go there, you get this, or when I go there, I get the same question because I don't look full Chinese either, right? But like they kind of like when I especially. Well, actually, yeah, both in Hong Kong and China. The question is very different. They never ask where you're from. Sometimes they'll ask the question more with a statement. They'll say, "Oh, you look like Chinese people," but not really. And so then I got to go into the background. I was like, "Well, my dad's from Hong Kong, and my mom is Canadian, and I'm mixed." And so they're like, "Oh." But it's really interesting. There's a Muslim people group in northwestern China. They're called the Uyghur people, and they actually have Turkic descent. And so like their whole culture, it's crazy. When you go to northwest China, it's like, it's culture shock in and of itself. Just going to mainland China, or going to Hong Kong, and then going from Hong Kong to mainland China. But then you step into like this northwest province called Xinjiang, and the Uyghur people, it's like everybody looks like me. Like it was the craziest thing.
Yeah.
Right. And so, I got confused with being Uyghur when I was there. And it was super interesting, right? Because I have like a kind of a European nose.
Some white features, yeah.
I do have some white features, my chin and my nose, and I guess my head shape and stuff. I don't know.
That leads to another question. Did you face discrimination by some people because they thought you were Uyghur? Because I know there's a very like big thing happening in China right now where there's a prosecution.
Oh yeah.
Uyghur Muslims.
Totally.
There's like 50 million of them going off to prison camps and stuff. So I was wondering if
that's right. Yeah, they're re-education camps.
Re-education.
Oh yeah, right.
You got to be careful. No, I did actually. That did concern me, and it was interesting. So when I was there in 2009, a week after I left, there was this big incident where 2013 was the last time I was there, and there was a big incident where there was like an attack in a train station. And it was blamed on like some radical Uyghurs, but I think it's brutal what's happening there now, and it's one of my wife and I we do want to go back, and I'd like to teach at an international school. I think that would be awesome. But yeah, that's like one of my concerns is definitely some discrimination that I could face, and my kids could probably potentially face as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, definitely.
You just need a Canadian flag on you at all times.
Yeah, exactly. That might not be the best idea right now, though, in China. But
yeah,
that's true. Could be even worse than being weird.
Yeah, they could.
Well,
how about you guys? Do you ever face any discrimination?
No, see, that's the thing. Like Sai mentioned earlier, because we're white, look white, we have that, I guess we have that.
We have the privilege.
We have that white privilege.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe that's part of why I got tattoos. I stamped myself to make sure, something... I need to prove to you I'm Filipino.
It's Asian on us.
Yeah.
I was a big thing. I remember a bunch of times, in fast food, I love going to fast food joints and speaking Tagalog because it instantly brightens up their day. They're like, oh, you know Filipino? oh. And then I would like, when I first got this tattoo, I would show them like, look, I am Filipino. And they're like, what? You're white.
Yeah.
So like even Filipinos don't know we're Filipino.
Right.
Right. And I was like, we knew we were for sure. But once I did his 23andMe, it just confirmed it.
Oh, yeah.
There's no doubt. It's not like mom was, because I think mom got that for you. It's not like she was panicking or dodging it. Oh, I'm not going to get it for you.
It was a birthday present. You got it for your
Yeah.
birthday.